right, welcome back here to Open. Daren Jaime here with you. The Partnership for the Homeless is a not-for-profit organization that is focusing on committed to building a just and equitable society, as well as creating lasting community change through solution-oriented programs and policy initiatives, eliminating the root causes of homelessness. In these uncertain times, the question is, how has the pandemic affected the homeless community here in New York City? Our guest in studio is the CEO of Partnership for the Homeless, Áine Duggan, and we're pleased to have her sharing with us.
Good to be talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
I know this interview takes place at a good time. I know, first and foremost, I guess there's some good news out there for New Yorkers who may be suffering with possible rent evictions and things of that nature. And I know you just got a new funding stream.
We have just gotten a new funding stream, a private funding stream to help families who are facing eviction, primarily to help people who have rent arrears due to COVID. And so we do encourage people to go to our website, which is partnershipforthehomeless.org, to see how they can apply for that funding, because we want to make sure that we get it to as many families as possible.
We talk about people with everyday jobs, but that homeless population, we knew that it was a problem before COVID-19 and certainly a problem now.
Well, there's sort of two ways that people are being directly impacted. The first is people who are already experiencing homelessness, so people who are on the street or people who are living in shelters. And then the second group of people who are impacted are, the hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs and who sort of are barely making ends meet and who cannot afford rent and other basic necessities. And so for the first group of people, the concern is people living in congregate shelters. So that's mostly people on the single adult side of the shelter system, and also people who are forced to live on the streets or take sort of refuge in the subway system, who are, more at risk. They tend to have more underlying conditions. And so our big concern there is the health risk for all of those individuals and making sure that they're safe. And then the work of the partnership is primarily on prevention. And so we have seen more and more families fall into arrears over the last few months than we have ever experienced in our entire 38-year history.
Well, give me a little bit about this, because we know that there was a moratorium that was placed on eviction. And so that did help some people, right? But on the other side of it, you had people who were on that slippery slope already, I presume. So give us a little bit about how things are playing out in that area.
So the moratorium is an enormous help, but it's only a first step. The moratorium on its own doesn't save anybody from eviction in the long run, right? So because the moratorium is due to end in mid-August, and by the time it ends, many families will have up to 5 months of arrears. And most of the families who have lost their jobs those were low-paying jobs. And so even if they get lucky and get re-employed come the end of the sort of lockdown, there is no way that they will be able to afford 4 or 5 months of arrears. And so the big concern for them is that they may be facing eviction as soon as the moratorium lifts. And one of the pieces of work is to make sure that we have private funding to help pay off arrears. But I think the big concern among everybody in the housing and homelessness community is the lack of government stepping up at any level to provide rental assistance for families.
And it says about 65,000 of our fellow city residents don't have stable housing. And it's indeed for the estimated 3,500 city residents that are living on streets, more than 60,000, including 22,000 in children in shelters across the 5 boroughs. Those are some pretty staggering numbers.
They are staggering numbers, right? We already have a mass homelessness crisis in the city even before COVID. And what those numbers really tell you is who's impacted. So, it is mostly families, and it's mostly families with young children. So the largest population in the shelter system is, children under the age of 18, and most of them would be young toddlers and sort of in the single digits. And what we need ultimately to help solve the housing crisis is investments by all levels of government in affordable housing and in permanent supportive housing. And in the meantime, due to COVID, what we need to see is government stepping in to ensure those numbers don't get worse. So if we already have over 60,000 people in shelters and on the streets, we need to make sure that we have money for eviction prevention so that we don't have hundreds of thousands of more families joining them.
Yeah. What are you hearing on the street? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of great concern. We're in the first phase of reopening up here in the city, but a lot of people still have a lot of concerns.
Right. It is, primarily we are hearing from families who already have arrears and who don't know what they're going to do, and who are concerned that they won't become reemployed for several months. Just because the city has begun to open up doesn't mean that people are going to get their jobs back in areas like restaurants or cleaning jobs, and in retail, which is, most of the jobs that have been lost, right? So that's one concern. Another concern that we're hearing is from undocumented families who are being harassed by landlords. And so the eviction moratorium is something that those landlords are not paying particular attention to and putting pressure on those families to continue to pay rent. And of course, for families who are undocumented who have lost their jobs, they don't have the extra resource of unemployment benefits very often. And even if they're eligible because of a minor in the household, they're usually too afraid to access that benefit. So we are really concerned about the well-being of undocumented families in the city.
Yeah, they are really a huge number. And are you worried have this history already that that number is going to continue to balloon?
Well, what we see with undocumented families, and the story that we have heard over and over again, is that anyone that we've spoken to recently has been saying that they have worked the entire time that they've been in New York City. This is the first time they've ever needed any kind of assistance. And so that's particularly difficult for the families. These are individuals who work really hard jobs, but because of COVID, through no fault of their own, they've not been able to do that. And so they don't have a robust sort of support system in order to be able to afford basic necessities like rent and food. And so unless rental assistance kicks in, and it has to go beyond the private funding, unless it kicks in at the federal level. I mean, the federal level is really the cornerstone of the answer to this problem. And there is a move in Congress to include $100 billion in emergency rental assistance in the next disaster relief package. And really, we need to see that passed in order to help not just families in New York, but all around the country who are facing the same thing.
Yeah. So we began talking about the new funding that's available. And I'm sure there may be some Bronxites who are saying, and across the city, who are saying, listen, how do I tap into this? How do I get connected to this? What would your response be?
So the easiest way is to go to our website, which is partnershipforthehomeless.org. They can also call the partnership. It's 212-645-3444. And they can speak to anybody at the partnership who can put them in touch with the staff who will assist them get access to this funding. But essentially, it's anybody who's in arrears who needs help can apply for that funding.
And so there's no eligibility requirements?
We have eligibility requirements for government funding, but because this is private funding, we're able to extend the eligibility. The vast majority of people are going to be low income. The vast majority of people who've lost their jobs. Just to give an idea of what we're talking about here, more than 2/3 of the jobs lost due to COVID are jobs that pay $40,000 or less. So we're talking about families and individuals who are very low income, who don't have savings and who are not able to sort of take care of the basic necessities. And that's the group of people that we are targeting. And we expect to be overwhelmed with the need. So in addition to this private funding and this available help at this moment, we do want to see some federal funding kick in for those families as well.
Well, Áine, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. Once again, want to get people connected, so please tell them before we wrap up, how are they able to get connected to you?
So they can go to our website at partnershipforthehomeless.org, or they can call the partnership directly at 212-645-3444.
All righty. We got to leave it there, but thank you so much for sharing with us and continue the great work. Obviously, we know a lot of New Yorkers are being affected by this housing crunch, and of course, COVID-19 really playing and wreaking havoc on a lot of people. Thank you for the great work that you're doing.